when trainers don't take into consideration what the human can actually do, like what they have capacity for, and they just sort of give them a blanket, assignment essentially without taking all of that into consideration, then when the person inevitably fails at
It's
doing
even
that
worse.
because you can't walk a dog for 2 hours a day when you have 3 kids and you work 60 hours a week and you just literally cannot do it, then the person feels worse and shuts down more and actually helps their dog less.
Welcome to the new episode of She Gets It Done. Make sure to hit subscribe, comment or like. We hope you love this week's episode. Enjoy! So the reason I really wanted to get you on, Jess, is because a few weeks ago we did an episode on what is it like living with a reactive dog. And we got so many comments on that, oh my gosh, I feel seen, I feel heard, I'm so glad to hear this. And I mean, I've been following your account for quite some time now. I don't know how long I've been following you. And I thought, man, I really want to talk to you about this because, I mean, I'm a dog trainer. I'm not a psychologist. But to me, I see a lot of PTSD type symptoms. And I always say to people, I'm not a psychologist. I can't tell you it's PTSD, but it sure looks like some of the responses people have. So I would love to, have a bit of a chat about that today. Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Sure.
Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a therapist. I'm a psychotherapist here in the States, and I have spent the last a little over 10 years now working as a therapist for children, teenagers, adults. And about 10 years ago, I also got my dog, who is the love of my life for sure. But he has some challenges with reactivity, resource guarding, just some behavioral stuff, anxiety for him for sure, and me as well. And I really struggled pretty significantly with him when he was younger. I still sometimes struggle with his behavior. We have come really far. I'm really proud of him and I'm proud of us both. So things look very different now in year 10 that they did in years 1 through 4. I would say, like, not even just year 1, but like years 1 through 4 were some of the toughest times. And Handlers and Humans really came about because of how much I struggled emotionally with managing him and having expectations that were not fair, but I didn't really understand that they weren't fair. And I really got to a point with him after some incidents and some especially challenging moments where I wasn't sure if I could keep him. I was considering rehoming him. I was thinking about how he's 2 years old. How can I do this for another 10 years or something like that, right? I would kind of look at the future and feel so overwhelmed. And there were times where I was, in bed crying because of something that happened. And I just couldn't figure out how to move forward. We were doing all the kinds of training things. I was so focused on training and fixing it and figuring it out and learning about dogs and like all of that stuff. And even though I'm a therapist, I didn't use the tools that I know to use with myself when it came to him.
Right.
So when I realized I needed to work on myself because I was already doing all the work on him, there was nothing more to do than work with him. I really started to be very active in working on my mindset, working on my own regulation, those types of things. And so Handlers and Humans really came from that experience and also from dog trainers that I became close to saying, oh my gosh, I wish I could send clients to you because they're all struggling too. So here we are.
That's really cool. So do you feel like now in your official job, you get quite a few dog related cases now?
Well, it's funny that you say that. So I do Handlers and Humans as a coach. And what that means and why that's a bit different from, of course, it's all informed by my background as a therapist. I can't help myself, but bring those things in. But with coaching, it's much more specific and niche, right? And focused on the particular challenges that people are having with their dogs and what comes up related to those things. So as a therapist, I'm going to be working with someone in a lot more of a broad, kind of open way with whatever it is that they're bringing to therapy. And as a coach for handlers and humans, I really, really help people zero in on how they can improve life with their dogs. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but it's all kind of informed, right, by not only my experience as a therapist, but also my lived experience as being someone who gets it and who lives it alongside of my clients.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think there's a big need for that, but a lot of people don't know that there is, people don't know what they don't know. And I mean, I'm in so many reactive dog groups, and you see people struggling, and lots of the posts will start with, I'm really embarrassed to admit this. I feel ashamed. And as a dog professional, I see it and I'm like, you don't need to feel ashamed, but people don't believe it, they're just like, it's that, I mean, there is a massive stigma on it, right? Like rehoming your dog. Oh my gosh, that's awful. And I feel like it's such, like, of course we don't want to just rehome a dog because, oh, he peed in the house once. Like, come on, people.
Yeah, sure.
But I feel like there should be more leniency for the human when they have to live a life with a dog that they simply can't live, either because it's dangerous or because they're burnt out or they're so stressed it's not going to work for the dog or the person. But there is so much shame on that, because if you go and tell oh, well, I had to rehome a dog, people are like, oh my God,
Right.
And I wish the rescue organizations, I think, were a little bit less harsh on that.
About that.
Yeah. Do you see that in your work at all?
I do. And actually I'm glad you brought this up, because when I started Handlers and Humans like 3.5 years ago. I didn't expect to work with as many one-on-one clients as I have about rehoming or behavioral euthanasia as well. Yeah. So I just thought, I'm going to help dog owners feel better about their dogs, right? And so many people started coming to me about trying to make a decision about those things, or they have made a decision and they're struggling with it emotionally. They're struggling with that shame, the stigma around it, judging themselves, right? And so I actually have ended up having an entire niche within a niche where I work with all kinds of dog guardians and dog trainers, but I have done some pretty specific work with folks who either already have made the decision to do rehoming or BE, or are trying to make the decision and want some support in thinking it through in a non-judgmental space. Yeah. So I actually do see it a lot. And I've seen it go in multiple directions. I've seen people who were considering it and then decided to keep their dog. I've seen people who were not considering it at all, and then all of a sudden they were like, you know what? I think that this may be a direction, and I'm kind of supporting them in that realization, right? And I've worked with people who then did go through with rehoming or euthanasia and kind of the aftermath of that, right? How do we cope with, now there's grief and loss, right? But it is so difficult to navigate grief and loss that you feel like you chose, right? Like I made this decision. Who am I to grieve about it? Yeah. So yeah, it has really come up a lot more than I expected. And I honestly really do enjoy doing that work. Now that I enjoy that people are going through that, because it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But I enjoy being a very safe, non-judgmental space for those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful that you have that. Like, I think one of the hardest conversations I've had is one of these. Like, I mean, sometimes as a dog trainer, you turn into a therapist. Like, I've
Oh
been in so
yeah.
many sessions where I didn't train a single dog, and all I was there for people to vent, or like partners
Yep.
were arguing, and I had to like find a middle way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my hardest one was a few months ago with a lady that, man, she did everything right, but it
Mm,
just did not work. That dog, and she had a special needs child, and she basically had two special need kids now, and it was just
right.
getting way too much. And that I think that took me 3 sessions of just this isn't gonna work, and it's not your fault. It's just
Right.
not, but the
Yeah.
guilt that she felt, and then a few months later she even emailed me saying, I'm so sorry, but I have to unfollow you from socials because it's too
Oh,
confronting to see anything dog
yeah.
related. I should actually reach
That's
out to
fair.
her now. But it shows how massive the impact is, and that there is just no
Hmm.
space to really talk about it for those type of
Right.
people, I think.
Right. Right. I think so too. And like you mentioned, the stigma is so huge.
Mm,
And yes, I absolutely know that folks who work in rescue and animal welfare, they see some really heartbreaking situations where people are just disregarding their
yeah,
dogs and
horrible.
just,
Yeah.
it's awful. But also, it's often not the case that someone is making that decision lightly,
Mm,
right? So we just can't make kind of blanket assumptions about if someone chooses to rehome or surrender a dog or whatever it is. It is often something that is one of the hardest things that people ever choose to do,
mm,
despite it being the right choice for them. And so I know that some people really see the worst of those situations, and so it's not that that never happens, but there's also that flip side to it where there are people who make these decisions and it is heartbreaking for them.
yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah.
Um, so you created reactive to resilient, a little program.
Yeah.
You want me to tell us something about that? A little
Yeah,
bit of
yeah, that's my
topic
little
change.
that's like yeah, that's my little tagline that I like to use about how we can kind of grow through through the reactivity sort of within ourselves a little bit. And so it really relates to that idea that I mentioned before, where when you have a dog with challenges, you're really looking at a long haul kind of journey with them, right? It's a marathon that we need to be preparing for.
Definitely.
If we're committing to our dogs and we're going to commit to their lifetime with us, then we have to create sustainability within ourselves. We have to create sustainable practices within ourselves in order to like ride the wave for the long term, right? Because it's going to be full of ups and downs.
Mm,
There's going to be amazing progress and wonderful moments and connection and joy and fun with your dog. And there's going to be times
it's
that it's
not.
not so much. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's
not,
not.
yeah. It's just not,
Yeah.
And our ability to not be reactive ourselves to those moments, right? To practice not being reactive
Mm,
ourselves in those moments and to practice building resilience, to feel what we need to feel, accept that frustration, that grief, that, all of the things that come along with it, but come back from it and
mm,
show up again over and over and over again. It's not that we're never going to be upset by our dogs, right?
yeah.
I'm in year 10, and if you're ever joined my community, you'll see like me venting about Dio
Yep.
just like anyone else is in there venting about their dogs, right? I'm not this perfect image
Oh,
of like,
totally.
I know how to cope with it perfectly. I'm never getting upset. I will go into the venting thread in the community and be like, this happened today. I'm so upset, right? I still am doing that. But I am able to feel those feelings, give myself space for them, and then show back up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Without kind of unpacking and living there, as I like to say, right? I don't stay in those moments for longer and longer like I used to.
Mm,
So it's really about building that resilience to come back over and over and over again and connect with our dogs over and over and over again,
yeah.
even with the ups and downs. So that's kind of like where that tagline comes from for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is important because you see that a lot. Well, I think with reactivity work, people need to work on their expectations.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the massive ones. Like first you need to change your expectations of your dog in general, which I think is a whole process on its own, because you get a dog and you want the coffee meetups and the beach and the
Yeah.
parks, and now you have this dog that doesn't like other dogs or people. So that in
Mhm.
itself, I think, is a whole thing that you need to come to terms with. That hasn't even got to do with your dog. But I feel like if you get to that point, you're helping your dog already by like 50%
Oh, yeah.
to stop putting them in situations that they're going to struggle. But then
Mm.
the other thing I feel like people struggle with is that, all right, so now we change expectations a bit and it goes well for 2 or 3 days or maybe 2 weeks, and we have a failed day, and then they lose everything. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll just give up, or everything has gone back to a
Yeah.
I think I find that hard as a dog trainer
Mhm.
to, because to me it's like, well, this is just part of the journey,
Right.
so that
Right.
like, I know it
Right.
sucks, tomorrow it's
Yeah.
better, so it'd
Right.
be
Well,
cool to
and
figure
you
out how to work with that.
right. Well, and it's you see so many more dogs, right?
True.
And people just see their dog.
Yeah.
And so you have a broader perspective. You have a more zoomed out perspective that it is part of the journey. And you see people's journeys in multiple stages in different ways in your work and in your career. And people are so understandably immersed in their experience and how hard this is for them. And all they have to focus on is today with my dog feels awful, right? And it's really hard to see in those awful feeling moments that it can shift and change slowly over time. You know that to be true because of the work that you do. But for anyone who's just in it, it feels like it's just never going to get better, or they're regressing, or they're failing, or all of those, those types of things. And, you mentioned expectations. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about today too was expectations really is like the sneakiest, most impactful thing that I feel like people are coming to me with, where
Okay.
they have, like you mentioned, expectations of their dogs that are formed by the hopes and dreams they have. They want to have the brewery dog, the coffee shop dog. It's also formed by society's,
Oh, totally. Yeah.
expectations of dogs too, like what dogs are supposed to do and the role they're supposed to play. Like there's a cultural and societal sort of piece there.
Yeah.
It also gets formed by our early experiences with dogs, right? How did our family look at dogs? Did we have dogs growing up? Did we expect them to be working dogs? Did we expect them to be house pet dogs? Like it's all formed from lots of different places. And so unraveling those expectations of dogs is really hard and complicated, much more than we think, right? But the additional piece, the extra layer on top of that, is the expectations we're also having of ourselves when it comes to dogs. So for me, I never had a dog as an adult before when I got my dog. I had dogs as a kid. Our dogs as a kid, they were outside dogs. That was, I lived, with my grandparents on some property, and they always had outside animals, and they had a purpose to them, right? They were pets, but first they had a purpose.
Yeah.
So I just didn't have the experience of needing to train a dog either, because I was a kid and my grandfather took care of that and, all these things.
Yeah.
So I get this dog, right? Completely unprepared. I get him. And I have no idea that dog training and handling a dog is a skill set, really.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you
Yeah.
you have that skill set. Right?
But
So,
I didn't. Like I didn't.
but you didn't work.
Yeah.
Sure, exactly. We all have to grow and create the practice opportunities to build those things. And for me, I expected myself to just know what to do.
Yeah.
which is hilarious. Why would I know? How would I know what to do? So I just felt like I was failing. I felt like it was all my fault, right? I was really telling myself some very unhelpful stories about living with my dog and working with my dog without giving myself grace and understanding that I was learning how to work with a dog at the same time that I was trying to bring this new puppy into my life and raise him and whatever. I was sort of like learning as I went.
Yeah.
And I expected myself to just be able to figure it out really quickly and know exactly what to do, as if I had been doing that my whole life, which I certainly hadn't.
Yeah.
So, expectations of our dogs is one piece of it. And the next piece of it is, are you being fair to yourself? Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is like being fair, like asking for help. And I mean, and now I think it might be harder even, because what do people do when they need help? They go on Facebook.
Oh, right. Sure.
And then it's like an onslaught of advice that some of it is extremely old school, or you're being told you're doing the exact wrong thing, and that other person says you're doing the right thing. So it's hard to, I feel like that really doesn't help with your own expectations. And or you have the people that are showing off. I'm putting it between brackets, but like the people that are like, oh, everything goes well every time for me, as a first time
right.
dog
Or I
owner.
just did this and it fixed this.
Yeah.
Right. Without recognizing that every person and every dog are bringing different things to the context, right? So it's like, oh, if you just do this, this will get better. Well, that didn't help my expectations, because guess what? I did do X, Y, and Z and it didn't get better. And then I'm frustrated. Then I feel like more of a failure, right?
Yeah.
And the cycle goes on. So it's not only the advice that can be conflicting, it's then how you take that in and apply it to yourself and say, well, I haven't figured this out and other people have. So what's wrong with me? Right. And that self-judgment just kind of keeps building and building in those things. And people are judgy in those social media communities sometimes, often, maybe not sometimes. Yeah. So
all the time.
that does not help either, right? So we're being judged by other people who are supposed to be supportive in the same sort of situations that we're in. So across the board, it's rough.
It is. So what would be some advice then that you would give a dog owner that's struggling with expectations and reactivity and setbacks and the feeling of hopelessness, I guess?
Yeah. How long could this podcast be? Because I could go on for hours. That is a big question.
That is a really big question.
Yeah. I've got like 4 hours of content to answer that question.
We can link it in the description.
Okay. Sounds good. So a couple of things that I think would be helpful for people to focus a bit more on to maybe make the journey a little smoother, right? First is, in the theme of the expectations piece, start asking yourself kind of, what story am I telling myself about this moment, about my dog, about this situation, and where is that coming from? Just bringing awareness to the way we're looking at things, bringing awareness to the way we're talking to ourselves about challenging situations, whether it's with our dog or not, that alone can be very, very helpful. So if you are struggling with your dog and you find that you're saying to yourself that you're failing, right? Would you look at someone else in that situation and say that they are failing? Probably not. You would say to that person, especially if it's someone you care about, you're trying the best that you can, you're learning along the way, your dog is so lucky to have you, right? You would never look at a friend or someone else struggling and say, yeah, you know what, you are failing. You would never do that. So just bringing some awareness to the way you're talking to yourself can really shed a lot of light on how that is impacting your emotional state. And we know our emotional states, right, impact our behavior. So pay attention to those pieces is kind of the first, I don't know, little piece of snippet of advice I would say to kind of try to help. It's a difficult thing to do, I will say. So just be mindful of that, because these thoughts and stories we tell ourselves are very kind of ingrained. So it's tough.
I think
But
it's,
from,
yeah.
okay.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think that's a really good piece. I might actually use that with my clients, that the ones that beat themselves up, and to just be like,
Yeah,
hey,
please do.
if this was a friend, would you say the same to your friend? To make them feel better, I guess. Yeah, I think that's
Right.
an easy enough one. Well, it's not easy, but it's something that you can go back to, like, hold on, am I being too hard on myself right now? Yeah, I like that.
Right. And it's a good quick little reframe, right?
Yeah.
It's a quick little reframe, because I'm horrified even thinking about saying something like that to my friends. I would never feel that way about them. Right. I know my friends are doing the best that they can. I know that they are amazing people who are growing and changing and doing the work. And I give them so much credit for that, and zero credit to myself sometimes. Right. So, and why? Why is that fair? What makes us different? Nothing. Right. So yeah, that's a helpful little tool right there, just to say, would I say this to someone I care about? If not, why does it apply to me and not to them? Right.
Yeah. Love that.
Another kind of piece I would think about is, again, in the awareness realm, is bringing more awareness to what you need and how you're feeling before you do things with your dog that may be challenging. Right.
Okay.
So, for example, the perfect example for this is if you are thinking of walking your dog, right? But you haven't eaten enough that day, right? And you're tired and work was really stressful, and your boss gave you, a hard time about something. And so that's on your mind, and you're agitated, right? And you're just off. You're just a bit dysregulated. And then you go walk your dog, right? And they have a reaction on that walk. You are starting out at sort of an emotional disadvantage to handle the aftermath of that tough moment with your dog. So before you do anything, whether it's a walk, a training session, taking your dog to visit somewhere, whatever it is, ask yourself what you need first, not what they need, what you need first. Because if you can get yourself a bit more regulated, if something were to be challenging on that walk or that vet visit or whatever, you're going to have more emotional resources
Deal
to
with it.
deal with it, in the moment, and to bounce back from it afterwards. So it's going to help you in the moment and sort of big picture as well.
Yeah.
And if you cannot get yourself regulated, maybe skip the walk, right? Maybe do something different with them.
Play some games in the
That's
house. Yeah.
exactly.
Something
Yeah. Do
fun.
something fun. Right. Exactly. Play, engage with them in a different way. So if I am trying to choose whether or not I walk Dio, right? So I have twin toddlers, and sometimes I'm home alone with all of them some days, right? I've got Dio, I've got the babies,
Busy.
I've got, right? Yeah. So I will walk Dio while along with pushing the stroller with the babies in it. However, I do not do that if I am not in a place myself to handle it. If he has a reaction and I'm trying to handle the stroller and handle him, I know that's going to be extra stressful for me. So unless I'm good, I don't do that.
Yeah.
I only do it if I'm in a place where I'm like, I can handle whatever happens, even if it's rough.
Cool.
And sometimes I just need to take a minute and kind of get myself together and give myself what I need, have a snack, have a drink of water, like something like that. And then I'm good to go. But there are other days where I'm like, I don't have it in me.
And that's
Not
okay
to,
too. That's it.
it's 100% right. And it's not that I don't have, yes, I could physically get up and walk him, but emotionally, can I handle whatever might happen? Maybe not.
So you're basically trigger stacking yourself.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, am I trigger stacked right now? And so
Yeah.
if I am, should I be going out there? Because
No.
to throw in another dog related word, I'm going to be over threshold immediately if
That's
something
it.
happens. Right. So the parallels are huge.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's exactly right. And I find that we tend to go, well, they need a walk. I have to get out there, right? And sometimes that's true. If you live in like a situation where you don't have a yard, sometimes you do have to get them out there to like go to the bathroom or something like that, of course. But can you do that in a way that's maybe more manageable than more
Exactly. Or
simple,
maybe it's
quick?
a good day to pop them in the car and just drive to the field and throw a ball around.
Yeah,
But you know
right.
you won't see anyone. Just do that then.
Exactly.
Or do it 10
Right.
minutes instead of half an hour. That's fine
Right.
too.
Right. It's okay that it looks different day to day,
Mm,
but we're often thinking more about what do they need today than what do I need and what can I handle? And then I think that sets people up,
yeah,
to really struggle.
very much agree.
Mhm.
I had some coaching with Tyler Muto, who we
Oh,
did
cool.
a podcast with a few weeks ago. And one of the things he taught me is that when you go to a house where there's a reactive dog or the family is struggling, we need to look at the owners as well. So we have
Hmm.
the trigger stacking or the threshold, but a lot of dog trainers don't do that because you see that the owner is already up here. So
Hmm.
let's first reduce the owner before we go into what the dog needs. And that could be, I don't know, I can't even think of anything at the moment, but it's like you need to relieve the pressure of the owner first before
Hmm.
you can work with the dog.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting because that's one of the things we talked about. I'm like, okay, cool. So the owner works 60 hours a week and they have kids and they
Hmm.
have this and they have that. And now there's a dog trainer there telling them to walk the dog for an hour every day and
Right.
to do 25 minutes of training. Like it's not going to happen, like
Right.
because there are
Right.
dog trainers out there that say stuff like that.
Oh,
And
yeah, absolutely.
we need to bring that message across and like your dog is going to be fine if you don't walk him this day. Or
Right.
I see it a lot with two dog households and
Mm.
the dogs might be pulling on leash or whatever, and the advice is then first you need to teach one dog and then the other dog, so you need to walk them separately. And the first thing people go is like, I don't have the time for that. And so I get that.
Right.
So
Oh,
maybe
that's
walk
hard.
dog one on Monday and dog two on Tuesday. It
Right.
doesn't have to be that complicated, and your dog will be fine.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
will they like
Yeah.
it? Probably not. But I'm not going to
Yeah.
push you into walking two dogs for an hour each. But like, I
Right.
don't walk my dogs for an hour each.
Well, and people already feel like they're kind of failing, right? And so
That's it.
when trainers don't take into consideration what the human can actually do, like what they have capacity for, and they
Mm,
just sort of give them a blanket, assignment essentially without taking all of that into consideration, then when the person inevitably fails at
it's
doing
even
that
worse. Yeah.
because you can't walk a dog for 2 hours a day when you have three kids and you work 60 hours a week and like, you just literally cannot do it, then the person feels worse and shuts down more
Mm,
and actually helps their dog less
yeah,
ultimately,
that's it.
so yeah, I mean, and I get it because I think that, and I work with dog trainers a lot too around this stuff. I think that what happens is you see an owner who is really struggling and there is all that pressure on them, and you want to help relieve that. And
Mm,
so as a dog trainer, you know how to help the dog, which you think is going to help the person, right? So it's just that the focus needs to shift a little bit to the person first. Whereas dog trainers completely are well-meaning and well-intentioned because they're like, if I can make things better with this dog,
mm,
the person's going to feel better. So you're doing it to help and fix and support the person,
yeah.
but it's just that it's not doing what you intend
Yeah, like,
because
are you adding
the
to the
focus.
workload, to the
Right,
already
right,
massive
right.
workload? I
Right.
think,
But again, it's totally understandable, right?
mm,
Because your skill set is the dog. You're like, I'm going to come in here and if
that's
we can
true.
get the dog into a better place, then the person's going to feel better and you want to help in
Mm,
that way. And so it's just that we have to balance that bit better and shift it a little.
yeah, I do. Yeah, that is important because I feel like a lot of dog trainers are so passionate about dog training that they don't realize that for most people, the dog is like, oh, it's like a family member, but it's not like passion. Like I have passion for
Yeah.
dog training, and you
Right.
maybe too, because you're obviously a more involved dog trainer than a dog person than the average person.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because that's how this whole handles in humans came to be. But the most people, they just want a dog that's not an asshole. And that's
Right.
it. Right? So they just,
100%.
that's what they want.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and that does not involve working them an hour a day and walking them an hour. They just don't want that. And I think a lot
Right.
of dog trainers struggle with that concept of this needs to be as easy as we can make it and as small.
Right. And honestly, you can build on those small things over time too. So
Definitely.
you're gonna engage people more, right? If you can break it down and offer things that are actually doable for them and actually realistic for them, and that might actually inspire them
To keep
to take the
going.
next step. And
Yeah.
right, exactly. So that goes to that kind of sustainability that I talked about before, where if you want to keep showing up for your dog over and over again, it can't always be at like level 10. Like some days it's going to be level 1, and some days it might be level 10, and some days it's going to be like 3 and 6 and 5. It's going to bounce
Yeah.
around, and that's okay. But when you start to see small moments go well and go better than they have before, you're more excited about doing more and maybe adding on an extra 5 minutes to the walk that than you would have done before because you're feeling
Yeah.
good and confident. And that is where the actually like the more sustainable change with the humans and the dogs, I think, ends up happening, right? Because they're doing it because they're enjoying that time and it's feeling manageable for them versus here's your assignment, you have to do this, this, and this, and it has to look like this, and it has to be this long. And people are like,
I'm overwhelmed. I won't even start. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Gonna spin it a little bit. I think one of the main things that I see come back is embarrassment when the dog has a blow up and how the environment responds. Like there's always judgmental people that will then, like I am a confrontational person. I just put it out there. I'm not like I really don't care if someone has something to say, I will say something back, right? That's just my personality. But I know a lot of people are terrified of confrontation. How do you have any suggestions on how to deal with people commenting on your dog? Because I think it's a very common thing that people just like, oh my God, my dog is barking and it should and it just builds that stress because what might people say? Like I just say, just try and ignore it, but it doesn't really work, does it?
Right. Yeah. This is such a tough one. I do just want to throw that out there. This is something that tons of people who come to me deal with. I also have struggled with being embarrassed or feeling ashamed and those types of things. So a couple of things in the moment when it's happening, you might feel that sort of overwhelming anxiety of confrontation. And so you might not say the thing that you wish you could have said or handled it the way you wish you could have. I mean, have you ever had that happen where you're like, man, I should have said this to them, right?
The whole conversation in your head afterwards.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You're like, I had such a good line and I didn't think of it in the moment. So just keep in mind that sometimes in those moments when we get a little flooded by emotion, right? Shame, embarrassment, whatever it is, anxiety, we may not handle it the way that our more regulated selves would want to handle it, right? And that's okay. So giving yourself a little grace for whether you did say something back or didn't say something back, it's where you were in the moment, right? After the fact, I always love to help people think about the source. I always say consider the source, right? This person who maybe gave you a judgmental look on the street, let's ask ourselves some questions about that person. Are we ever going to see them again? Probably not. Are they someone who has awareness of reactive dogs and dog behavior and dog emotion and all of those things? Probably not, or else they wouldn't have been judgy, right? If they are a person who doesn't have the knowledge and understanding that you have about your dog and you understand where their reactivity is coming from, do we put stock in someone's opinion if we know their opinion is very uninformed? Typically, not really, right? So if someone is spouting some stuff off to me about like, I don't even know, like
Control your
politics or something,
dog.
right? Like
Yeah, no,
anything.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
if I know that their opinion is not based in fact, I'm gonna care a lot less about that opinion, right? I'm gonna be like, okay, you're kind of uninformed about that, right? So afterwards, talking yourself through who that person is and where their kind of judgment might be coming from and whether or not you would trust that person based on what you know about them, which is very little, and they know very little to nothing about you except for that snapshot of a moment. That's a helpful way to help you not get stuck in the shame and stuck in the embarrassment long term. So in the moment you may still feel it, but make sure you're processing that afterwards. That is a helpful thing to do. The other piece, honestly, it is powerful to go connect with other people who do get it in the aftermath of those moments.
Right.
So if you have had a moment where someone was really judgy or something like that, which happens all the time, as you know, go to the people who do get it.
Yeah.
And have them process it with you, because then you're going to say, realize, right, this was someone who truly doesn't understand, and I don't need to put weight into their opinion and judgment. And here are the people who do get it, and they would never respond to me that way. So that's a healing kind of thing
Yeah,
to
I like
do.
that. I
too.
like that.
Yeah.
I do that as well. But you know what? It
Mhm.
actually gives me a bit of insight as well on why people do these posts, because I see these posts all the time, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, this person, I was walking my dog and he had a blow up and this person was judgmental. And for me, I'd be like, how can this bother you so much that you post it on a random Facebook group and you can't let
Mhm.
it go? But it's really good for me to hear that. I was like, all right, this is a good way to process and feel
Yep.
seen and heard. So next time I see
Right.
that post, I will look at
Yeah.
it differently. So less
Yeah. Yeah.
judgmental from my end.
It's so well, and it's so healing to feel seen and heard
Mm,
in that way when you just have had an experience where the opposite happened, right? So you had someone judge you, you had someone judge your dog, someone say something mean or rude or whatever it is.
mm,
That feels so isolating. It's so painful. It's so, right? And so then to go to a community of people who accept and
understand.
understand you and your dog, it's the opposite of what you just experienced with that judgmental person. And so that can help counterbalance or like counteract that impact,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, so consider the source, right? Do we want to put weight and
And
importance into this person? And
mm,
then go to people who do get it and see what kind of support you can get there.
yeah, I love that. I think that would help a lot of people to realize it's okay. It
Mhm.
happens, and then I like that I can advise that better now. Because for me, I've often
Mhm.
been more like, it happened. The person doesn't matter. You never see them again. I do say that,
Right.
and then it's
Yeah.
like, don't hang in it. Don't stay.
Right.
Because I feel like some people keep going back to that moment. I'm like,
Mhm.
you're not
Mhm.
helping yourself or your dog by
Right.
staying in that moment. It happened, let it go. But obviously,
Right.
saying that isn't
Yeah. Well,
gonna
so
make
that's
you
why
let anything go.
right, right. I mean, it's kind of like that thing where it's like when you tell people to calm down, like that never helps them calm down.
Sure.
Right. So,
Makes
so
it
what I
worse.
would just do, I think that you are on the right track. And what I would just suggest doing is make those things into questions, right?
Mm,
Have that person that you're trying to help them let it go, right?
yeah.
Ask them questions about the person who is judgmental to help them get to the conclusion themselves that you want them to get to, which is this person doesn't matter. You're never going to see them again. Right.
Right. Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like that matters. It's still hurtful, still isolating. It's still painful to have someone act that way towards you. So that's why the consider the source exercise is like something I do a lot. I have a whole like list of questions actually that I go
Oh,
through with
cool.
people and where I can kind of ask them like, well, if they are a person who's because sometimes it's not the stranger on the street. Sometimes it's the family member who comes over to visit, or it's the friend who has something to say, and that's super painful and
Definitely.
shaming too. So asking questions about whether or not we want to choose to invest our emotions into this person's opinion and agree with it or not or whatever, that can help people kind of get to that conclusion themselves, which is more powerful than you saying, don't worry about it, let it go. So in your
Dismissive.
intentions,
Yeah.
yeah, well, no, I wouldn't say it's dismissive because your intentions are very good and you're not wrong that this person probably, right? You're not wrong that this person's opinion isn't helpful or it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's that, it just doesn't feel that way to the kind of recipient of that in the moment. So help them kind of get to that.
Cool. I love that. And I think a lot of dog trainers that might listen to this would be helped with that as well. Because
Okay.
again, we see it on the daily, right? It's just like
Right. Oh,
whatever.
totally.
we
Right.
but
You
we
have a lot.
vent. Yeah. I
Yeah.
will
Yeah. And
text
you have a lot
my
more practice.
yeah, that's it. I'll text my dog trainer friend and I'm just like, oh my God, this idiot, So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then I
Well,
forget about it.
it's so similar. It's so similar to like we were talking about before. Like you have a bigger context and you have a bigger view and perspective of working with dogs. This person just has them and their dog
The
who means
dog.
the
Yeah.
world to them,
Yeah.
So it's harder to see that big picture.
Yeah. Um, I'd love to go back to what I said at the beginning, about PTSD type of responses in
Mm,
handlers when they have reactive dogs. Is that something you see? Like, I think a big part of rehabbing a reactive dog is also rehabbing the owner.
sure.
Um, and do you think naming that as like I struggle with naming it. I think that's where I want to go to because
Mm,
I find the most unhelpful thing to say to people is like, oh, your anxiety goes down the leash. Well, okay,
yeah.
you help no one with
Yeah.
that, And
Right.
I because I can't help my anxiety, like it's there.
hmm
And it goes,
Yeah.
and I also think it's not necessarily true because dogs don't
Mm.
just get anxious because you're anxious, because then we would have a lot more anxious dogs in the world, right?
Oh, sure. And I mean, I've thought about this topic a ton because I agree that idea of like it's going down the leash and whatever, what it ends up doing is it makes people feel worse,
Mm,
right? It makes people feel like it's my fault. If I just were calmer, it wouldn't happen, right? And I
yeah.
will tell you right now that at this point in my journey with Dio, I'm not anxious when I'm walking him anymore. Like I am fully fine with
Yeah.
what like yes, he still has his moments and I still get upset by them, but I'm not going outside being like, where's every dog? Where's every, right?
Mm,
Like I'm not what
not anymore.
I,
Yeah.
not anymore, right? And believe me, I'm 10 years into this. So like everybody keep that in mind. Like,
Yeah.
so it took me a long time to walk outside and feel chill about I'm going to be able to handle,
Mm,
whatever kind of comes our way.
yeah.
And he still will have reactions sometimes.
It happened.
So how can that be true that it's all me if I'm not anxious and
Because
it's
it's
still
not
happening?
true. That's it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So
But
that's something to kind of keep in mind. Now, I will say that we are a part of the puzzle.
oh,
I
totally.
don't want to like,
100%.
it's yeah, like we are a factor, if dogs can tell when we're having heart arrhythmias, right? They know when our heart rate changes, they know when our breathing changes, they know when our scent changes when we're scared. They
Mm,
know that we are maybe gripping the leash or holding tension in our bodies differently. Like they read things differently. So, yes, they are going to notice those things, but no, that is not the absolute cause
oh,
100%. Like it's
yeah.
not your fault, right?
Mm.
Um,
But it's
so
those, I think it's those, sorry to interrupt you,
yeah.
it's those reflex responses
Yeah. Yeah.
that are the problem for a lot of dog
Mhm,
owners. Like I see it
mhm,
even with myself. Like my dog is reactive. not really anymore, but he's not social with other dogs, but he can be off lead and all that. But I work with clients that have social dogs, and we might be doing like a recall session, and I see a dog coming in the distance, and no matter what, my initial response is always grab the dog. Yeah, because
Right.
it's
Yeah, well, you
ingrained
know where
in
that
me.
could go.
And
Yeah.
exactly, even though the dog is social, nothing happens. It's just something that I can't help. And I think a lot of dog owners with reactive dogs don't know how to get rid of that reflex, right? Because oh my God, there's a dog across the street. I better brace because now my dog is going to go, right? And I feel, and that's what I label as PTSD responses, because it's not your generalized anxiety that causes it. It's that
It's like a
reflex of
response.
like, oh my God, here we go.
Right.
What
Well,
do you think of that?
I would think about whether or not that response in some ways also can be adaptive and okay, right? So not always, like sometimes it's over the top, or like it's not serving a helpful purpose. But like the example that you just gave about I'm doing some work with a dog and a client, and I see a dog coming and you're like, ooh, grab the dog. I wouldn't see that as a problem, right? Because you want to make sure that everyone's safe. You don't know what that dog who's coming is going to do, right? So so I would also think that like it does serve a purpose sometimes. So it's not that we want to like get rid of it entirely. It's that, again, if we do have that reflex, we want to be able to assess whether or not it's adaptive or not adaptive, and then like respond accordingly, if that makes sense. So if you do tense up or you do brace yourself, can you then notice that you did that? Because that's a huge thing, is having awareness of that, right? Right. So notice like, oh, I just braced myself. Do I need to be braced? No. Okay.
Relax.
Like let me take a moment and assess my situation and the surroundings and that kind of thing. So like if I see a dog walking down the street coming towards us and it's looking a little iffy, that dog's body language, right? I'm going to brace for how Dio might respond to that. But that's adaptive in that moment. That's not just because I'm scared of him having a reaction. That's like, I'm assessing, okay, I'm going to stay braced here because I might need to handle something. So I think sometimes we get a little all or nothing with these kind of like things, right? Like I need to be able to be totally cool, calm, and collected in every moment. And I need, right? Actually, that response is trying to be helpful to you. That response is trying to protect you. So can we allow it, but not let it get too far out of hand? Can we not let it show up and stay there and have like, if you stay braced, right, after the danger has passed, so to speak, that might be where it's maladaptive now. Right. So yeah, that's a whole other podcast right there. It's like the conversation around that. But I can see where there's themes, right? So what is a trauma is different to every person, right? So we never say, oh, this type of situation shouldn't be traumatic to you, or this type of situation should be traumatic, because you and I could experience the same car accident. We could be in the same car and have the same car accident and completely different responses. You could walk away from it with no PTSD symptoms. I could walk away from it with significant PTSD symptoms. So while I wouldn't name it necessarily, like I'm clinically diagnosing
Oh
you
no,
here
definitely.
with PTSD, like that. But there are themes, right? There are sort of undercurrents that share similarities in our sort of nervous system response to those moments that are there because we've had an experience that we feel like we now need to protect ourselves from. So I think we can look at that, the adaptive reasons that it shows up. Then we don't have to be so judgy of ourselves to be like, I need to not do this. I need to never do this. I need to never brace. You're gonna brace sometimes. Right? Because that's a part of you that's like, oop, I need to watch out. I need to be careful. So it's a part of you that's trying to protect you and support you. We just want to, learn how to work with that and, acknowledge when it's appropriate for it to be there or not appropriate for it to be there.
Yeah, that's some really cool insight because I didn't know that. Yeah, to me,
Oh,
yeah, like I
yeah.
didn't know that it's like if it's adaptive, it's fine. Because to me, it
Well,
isn't fine. Like I'm like, why
yeah,
can't I
to do
just
that.
be chill when this happens? Or
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think the same when people walk a street and they know
Hmm.
there is houses that are always a problem. Like the first
Hmm.
time I walked that lap with the owner, it's like, oh, this dog is behind this house and this dog is around
Right.
that house.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
just like, it's okay. I've got the dog.
Yeah.
I'll manage
Right.
the situation, but they're so
Right.
worried. They want to prep
Right.
me. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
prepping. I'd rather not
Yeah. You're
prep
like,
you.
I'm okay. I've got
Yeah.
this. But you can see where that is their body
Mm,
trying to protect. They know that there's like a threat,
yeah.
basically. So of course they're going to brace. It's trying to help them navigate that moment that they know is coming. That's going to be stressful and scary and whatever else. You haven't had that experience with that dog behind that fence, particularly. So you're not going to
Yeah.
brace or worry about it. So they're just having a response that's trying to help them,
Mm,
you know? And it just might be that the level of that response is not matching the
the,
level of actual threat of the situation anymore. And that's where we maybe need to work with it and kind of pay attention to it.
mm,
But sometimes I think the example you gave makes a ton because you were explaining that. And I was like, yeah, I would do the same thing, whether or not my dog was social or not. Like, I would be like, because you don't know, right?
yeah.
So you're gonna be like, let me get the dog, come over here,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Let me assess the situation for safety. I
That's
think
it.
that's actually quite appropriate in that moment.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. I think that is really helpful for people because I do think people feel ashamed about that as well. It's like, oh my God, every
Totally.
time I'm here, I get this panic because this dog is
Right.
off lead in a distance.
Right. Right.
And I think sometimes it is unwarranted and sometimes
Yes.
it isn't. But
Right.
yeah,
Right.
navigating those
I
feelings.
think that we're ultimately like judging ourselves for that.
Mm,
Right. And if we could just say, oh, my body's trying to protect me, right? That shifts our entire perspective on that response
yeah.
and actually takes away some of its intensity because we're stepping back into the driver's seat. We're stepping back into our logical brain essentially and saying, oh, I don't need that right now.
Mm,
I don't need that response right now. Thank you, body, for, stepping in and trying to protect us, but actually we're okay.
yeah.
Versus being like, I need to stop doing this. That's not going to stop it.
Yeah. That's
So we need to be able to notice it, bring awareness to it, and shift it.
yeah. And I reckon if you can do that, your dog will notice the change as well. Like again, flows
Probably.
on, right? So
Yeah, exactly. So if they're noticing your anxiety going up, they're also going to notice it coming down.
mm, I love
So
that. That really made
yeah.
my mind go like, oh my God. That is something that you just need to, yeah, that's really cool. I love that. I can't wait to share this as well with all the other dog trainers because I think there's a lot of us that don't understand it, because
Hmm.
maybe it is because our pool is so big and we
Hmm.
kind of lose
Yeah.
a little bit of sensitivity to what owners see
Hmm.
as reactive. Even that, right?
Right.
Like I come to houses
Hmm.
sometimes and the owner is like super stressed and I see it and I'm like, your dog isn't even reactive. Like I wouldn't say
Right.
that, but in my mind,
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
this is so
Right.
minor. This
Right.
shouldn't be a
Right.
problem.
Right.
Again,
Right.
because if I go to a Shih Tzu that just barks at people coming to the house, and the next hour I have to work with a human aggressive German Shepherd, right? That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Shih Tzu is
You're
nothing. I'm like, yeah, give me 20 of those.
yeah, your context is so different. Your perspective is so different because you have all of those different examples to kind of go off of.
Yeah.
And so your kind of attunement to the level of intensity of different dogs and situations is a bit more, I guess, maybe like balanced and fair and kind of accurate
Mm,
because you have that context and people don't have that context. And so
yeah.
they think their dog is the worst demon possessed dog that ever existed. And you were like, you haven't seen anything, you know?
Yeah.
So, and you know, but that's also their objective. That's their subjective reality, right? Like to them,
Yeah, but I
that
think
is
it's
the worst thing.
important as dog professionals that we understand that perspective better, because my
Totally.
perspective
Right.
is not realistic for
Right.
the general people, you know?
And I will say that, and this is going to sound like it cancels out what we're talking about, but it doesn't, because both things are true at the same time. You sharing that context, though, sometimes with people so that you can educate them on actually it's not as bad as they feel like it is, can also be very helpful. So you kind of need to do both things, where like you need to, again, recognize their perspective and how it's different from yours for that reason, and giving them a glimpse into what you see and what you see on your in your career, but also then in their dog specifically, can really help give them a sense of that context and how that might really help them to know that, right? It would really help me to have had someone tell me, your dog isn't as bad as you feel like he is. You know?
Yeah.
You know? So I think it's both things are true. You have to have that sensitivity, you know, to what people feel like their reality is. And it's super powerful when the professional who has more knowledge than me, right, holds hope for me that I don't have for myself right now or my dog right now. So that's super powerful too.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much for that.
Of
Such
course,
great
yeah.
insight, lots of food for thought. Do you want to let people know how they can reach you, or you have online resources that you might want to plug?
I do. This is great timing. I actually just did a massive refresh of my website. So if anyone wants to learn more about what I do and what I offer, handlersinhumans.com is my website. I have individual coaching programs as well as a group support program for dog owners, and I also do individual coaching and support for dog trainers around this kind of stuff. And I have a program called Person-Centered Dog Training, which is meant for dog trainers to learn some of these sort of core counseling skills. Yeah, exactly. We go deeper into this stuff. So yeah, I could talk about this stuff all day. So anybody reach out at any time.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link it all in the description of the YouTube and Spotify links. And yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Jess.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.